Eric Rowan's video where he talks about the losses that he suffered of the former nuclear members of the Wyatt family who were deceased. And it seems like he's really going through stage 2, like the guilt phase, of really just not being there when they needed him. Some of that is real life trauma of not being around when John Huber died, because that was kind of in the tail end of the middle-ish of the pandemic, and not being around when Wyndham died last year. Now, some of that's just the actual, in real life, some of that's just life. Everybody's doing their own thing. In the story, that part of it doesn't so much matter as to why he wasn't around. The great thing about this part, or even the meta situation is, and this is the sadness of that I feel for WWE fans, is WWE fans just mostly watch WWE. They get offended when you talk about other wrestling shows. They get offended when you talk about the rest of wrestling. But in this story, which WWE won't take advantage of, the rest of wrestling is part of the story. These men were other places. They were doing other things. They were acting in movie roles, or they were doing all these other things in their real lives, wrestling in other companies or doing other appearances. And so we were just not there. Fans who will watch this know the outside part of the story. WWE fans might not. All that is to say, he feels guilty. This is a contrast to Bo's anger and Bo's revenge in a way. It won't be billed as a revenge tour. Part of the thing that happened off stage, and I'm going to link to in the description box below, is the Dreadmare series, where you really get to see part of the decline of Bo Dallas / Taylor Rotunda, and it's mostly where he uses his name to highlight the downside, the descent into madness. And it will make a lot of the Uncle Howdy stuff make more sense. But as a commentary on grief, and this is where I'm going to talk about this thing I caught at the end of the segment, which is the lantern thing. I've done it personally with trinkets, or you'll wear something, or you'll clip something on your bag, where it reminds you of that person. It makes you, it allows you to feel that they're still there. For Bo, or for Uncle Howdy in this case, it's the lantern. So when he's lost, you if you watch the end of that beatdown, and everybody comes out and he's kind of still looking around, he's not quite centered, right? But when he locks eyes with the lantern, you see his whole face change, and it's like it puts him in a different headspace. And I see it. I'm like, okay, so the lantern's your thing. The lantern's your talisman. Much like in another storyline that WWE's doing right now, in the CM Punk Drew McIntyre storyline, the bracelet is becoming I wouldn't say it's a MacGuffin, but it's becoming the focal point of, it's Punk's talisman. It's Punk's thing that connects him to his wife and his dog. Little touches like that are important, because what that shows you, and I mean, let's contrast the two stories for a second. In the turmoil of these two men vying for championships and making each other's lives miserable, in real life, in the lives of regular people, there are all these little things that you just miss all the time, that you may even think they're important. Like, there might be things you use every day, like that bracelet of Punk's, or my bag, or anything that you use every day that is a trinket of yours, it's like a pocket watch. Anything that you have that's important to you, you carry around, that wouldn't seem important to the average person who doesn't know you. But if you catch it, you catch it, or as like Punk talked about it. That's why the bracelet became a thing. No one's talked about on the commentary table. No one's even mentioned the fact it's the same lantern. It's the lantern that Bray used to always carry. It's just taken as a given. But no one's really paid attention to how Bo interacts with the lantern. I think that's going to come up later. I think it's a very interesting point. But it's a point about grief, that you hang onto somebody's clothes or their hats. It's how like if your granddad smoked cigars and you get a whiff of it out of the blue, it's like, oh, he's around. Like those little things happen. In this story, the Fireflies are coming back to being a central thing. It's one of the reasons why, down the line, if it keeps happening, Jey Uso's going to make himself a target. He tried a couple of weeks ago. Was like, no, I'm giving you back the Fireflies. They keep doing that, and I'm cool, but it's a great tribute to you, and that's the way I want to leave it. Because he doesn't want any smoke with the Wyatts. So he's trying to be cool about it. That's why he's quickly trying to pivot into, I'm going to chase Rhea Ripley and not get involved with these dudes who I know will jack me over these Fireflies. Because some of them, and I think in different videos we're going to find them all in different stages of grief. The leader is angry. And the leader is making a point about family and friendships and loyalty, which is why Chad Gable is a target. Down the line, you might get into Solo Sikoa being a target, betraying Roman. When you start seeing the small parts or the why as to a thing happening, you begin to go, oh, well, this guy, and they've been alluding to it on SmackDown. That's the interesting thing. Before Michael Cole moved back to Raw, it's been mentioned between the commentary teams of what makes someone a target. From a storytelling standpoint, and we're going to kind of close on this thing, it's a difference in what WWE is doing with their storytelling currently, which they didn't do in the past. They make it a point that every little piece of their broadcast is becoming important. Little drop comments by the commentary team. Looking at all who's in backstage interviews. Is there a puppet in the background watching you? There are all these little details that in this story are becoming important, and they train the audience for some of that from what Bray used to do. But you see that idea in other storylines. It's in the Judgment Day storyline. A lot of the same elements are being used. So they're slowly training their audience to a different style of storytelling that I think they're going to employ going forward, and I think will be a good vehicle for covering bigger topics. All that's going to depend on how this grief topic is covered in the Wyatt 6 story. And like I said, there's a lot of little pieces. But let me know if you caught something else that I didn't catch last week or this week. This coming week, I think we might get, though I haven't checked any other people who do other YouTube channels about this story. I expect the Dexter Lumis story to be next. And the reason I expect the Dexter Lumis story to be next is I expect him to kind of talk about the loyalty aspect, because he's a guy unconnected from the Bray story. He's not Alexa. He's not Braun Strowman. He's not Joe Gacy, who was being seen as kind of a Bray equivalent. He's not Rowan, who has a definite connection and is the last original Wyatt. So what's Lumis's story? Why is he involved? What's his connection to Taylor? That when you start seeing the connections, it's something else that somebody else. I'll leave on this. Somebody else talked about on another podcast. What if these guys are just here? This group is here, as they seemingly are, to get him through this. This is the group, for whatever reason, is surrounding this ailing person to deal with his grief. So now I leave you with this question: if you have a group of people who are if you have a community, which Rowan professes that he did not have, and why he's here, if you have a community to help you grieve, are they the bad guys? Their method might not be great, but can you look at them as just regular bad guys, given what their mission is? That's a good question. We'll try to answer that question in episode 4. Episode 3 is the John Cena discussion and what his story could be on the farewell tour. So, for the millions watching around the world, I will see you next week. Wrestling with a Plot. Like, share, and subscribe.